In slide 4. I used to think the internet had desensitized me to fear. I was wrong. My name's Ethan, and I'm the guy behind the terrifying film found at a thrift store post on Reddit last December. It wasn't supposed to blow up like that. It was just me showing off something weird I'd found in a Kodak carousel box labeled 1978 Vacation. But what I discovered inside that box changed my life. I collect old cameras and projectors relics from when photography was still magic. That day, I was digging through a dusty thrift store in suburban Phoenix when I found the box. I didn't care about the slides, I just liked the case. But when I got home, curiosity got the better of me. I set up my loop and started going through them. The first 3 slides were boring family photos, people by a pool, a birthday cake, a canyon view, pure nostalgia. Then came slide number 4. It looked wrong. Dark, grainy. A single flashbulb had caught a dimly lit wood-paneled room. A figure sat in a cheap armchair, back turned to the camera. At first I thought it was someone asleep, but their posture, it didn't look right. Too slumped, too still. I snapped a picture with my phone and sent it to my 2 friends, Liam and Sarah. Liam, always the skeptic, texted back, "Congrats, you bought a hangover photo. Welcome to the 70 seconds. Sarah, on the other hand, she was obsessed with true crime. She zoomed in, sent back questions. What's that reflection near the bottom right? Too bright for a lamp. And the wrist, do you see that? That's not a shadow." I looked again. There was a small glint of light near the figure's hand. I scanned the slide in high resolution, magnified it, and froze. Something metallic wrapped around the wrist. Not a bracelet. Not jewelry. It looked like duct tape. That's when I decided to post it on Reddit, hoping someone could identify what I was seeing. Within hours, the post exploded. Some said it looked fake. Others thought it was from a movie. But one comment from a throwaway account called Throwaway Witness 91 cut through the noise. The flash isn't reflecting off duct tape. It's a zip tie buckle, industrial grade. Look at the cable shadow above the wrist. This person isn't sleeping. That line. This person isn't sleeping. I couldn't shake it. I showed Sarah and Liam. Liam finally stopped joking. "Ethan, if that's real, call someone. Don't post more." But Sarah was already analyzing again. "Look at the wall behind the chair. See that square shadow? Looks like a vent, and there's something etched on it." I boosted the contrast on the scan. Barely visible, but there it was. 207. A motel room number. My stomach dropped. If it was real, this wasn't just an eerie photo, it was evidence. Reddit users started digging. One analyzed the wood paneling and said it matched 70 seconds era motel construction. Another identified the carpet pattern as common in Arizona motels. Sarah went further. She recognized the stitching in the carpet as belonging to a specific manufacturer used in Phoenix motels during the late 70 seconds. After hours of obsessive searching, she called me. "I found it," she said breathlessly. "The Desert Crest Motel, Route 60, demolished in the 90 seconds. Except, one wing still stands. It's storage units now." I wanted to stop. Liam begged me to. "Don't go there, man. You're not an investigator. You'll just mess up evidence." But curiosity, or maybe guilt, pushed me and Sarah to go. We drove out there that Friday night. The air was heavy, with dust and silence. The remaining motel wing was half buried in darkness, the parking lot cracked and overgrown. We walked along the faded numbers painted beside each door. 201, 202, 203. When we reached room 207, the door was slightly ajar. I don't know why, but I pushed it open. The smell hit first: rot, metal, mildew. Inside, time had stopped. Same paneling as the photo. Same cheap layout. And there, under a layer of dust, was the patterned carpet Sarah had found in the archives. She pointed her flashlight up. There it was, the air vent. The same one from the slide, with the numbers 207 faintly etched on the frame. Everything lined up. The chair, the vent, the carpet. The photo wasn't staged. This was it. The room was mostly empty except for a broken dresser, a coat rack, and in the far corner, something covered in a canvas sheet. Sarah lifted it before I could stop her. Underneath was an olive green armchair, the exact one from the photo. The seat cushion was deeply sunken, molded by a body that had sat there for far too long. "It's facing the closet," Sarah murmured. Why would it face that way? The closet was a small alcove, missing its sliding doors. Empty, just a rod and shelf. But something about it felt wrong. I stepped closer and saw the back wall scratched, uneven. I ran my hand across it, and my fingers caught on deep grooves. We shined the flashlight. The entire back panel was covered in tally marks. Not neat ones. Jagged, chaotic, desperate, dozens, hundreds of them, carved into the wood from floor to ceiling. That was when the full horror hit me. Whoever sat in that chair wasn't just restrained. They'd been here alive for a long, long time. We ran. I don't even remember locking the car doors. I just remember shaking, the sound of Sarah sobbing quietly beside me, the smell of that room still clinging to my clothes. We called the police anonymously that night. We told them everything: the location, the slide, the tally marks. We didn't mention Reddit, just said we were exploring old buildings. 2 weeks later, the police confirmed they'd found human remains buried behind the old motel wing. A woman. The investigation reopened under the name the Silent Witness Case. Liam was furious. "You realize what you've stirred up?" But Sarah and I, we felt something else. Not pride, not relief, just a cold, hollow feeling that we'd looked too far into something meant to stay buried. And the worst part? That slide wasn't the only one in the box. Weeks passed. The police kept the site sealed off, and my post was archived, dissected, and forgotten, another internet mystery swallowed by the algorithm. But for me, it didn't end. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tally marks, and worse, the empty chair. I told myself the story was over, that I'd done what I could. But one night, while packing up the carousel to hand over to the detectives, I noticed something. I'd never really looked at the other slides closely, not after what we'd found. I pulled one labeled Poolside 78. It was a bright, sun-drenched scene. A family by a motel pool, all smiles and overexposure. Kids splashing, a car parked behind them, totally ordinary. Until I saw him. A man standing in the background, leaning against a pale blue sedan. Collared shirt, dark hair, squinting into the sunlight with an easy smile. He looked relaxed, casual, forgettable even. Except for one detail. He was wearing a large silver ring on his right hand. A thick, ugly signet ring that caught the sunlight just right, flashing like a mirror. Something clicked in my mind, a cold, metallic flash of realization. I opened the scanned image of slide 4, the Silent Witness. Zoomed in on the tiny pinprick of light Sarah had noticed by the figure's feet. The glint that the Reddit investigator said was a zip tie buckle. It wasn't. The reflection was the exact same shape, the same brightness, as that ring. That meant the person taking the photo, the one crouched near the victim, hand steady on the camera, was the man in that vacation picture. The smiling stranger by the pool. The killer had photographed his own crime, and I was the only one who knew what his face looked like. My stomach dropped. I could feel the air in my apartment thicken as that realization settled. This wasn't a ghost story. This was documentation, a serial predator's scrapbook frozen in film. I backed up the photos, emailed Sarah, and told her what I'd found. She didn't respond right away. When she finally called, her voice was shaky. "Ethan, you need to stop looking. You're not built for this. Let the police handle it." But I couldn't. The image burned in my mind, that smirk, that casual hand with the ring, and something else. Behind the man, by the pool's edge, was a small shadow on the wall. A number. 207. The motel. The same one. He'd taken both photos there, the vacation picture and the photo of the bound figure. It was all part of the same timeline. The Desert Crest Motel hadn't just been a crime scene. It had been his hunting ground. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left the slides on my desk, half packed, half forgotten. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a faint mechanical click. Soft, rhythmic, almost like a shutter sound. I sat up, heart pounding, and realized it was coming from the box. The old carousel's auto advance timer was running, moving through the slides on its own. I stared at it in the dark, the machine silently cycling through the images like an invisible hand was running the reel. I unplugged it. The sound stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I brought everything, the slides, the box, my scans, to the police. I told them everything I'd pieced together. The detective who met me, a graying man named Harlan, flipped through the photos silently. When I showed him the ring, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first to see this," he said. "Back in '79, we had 3 unsolved disappearances linked to motels along Route 60. All women. No suspects, no photos, nothing." He pointed to the poolside shot. "But this changes things. For a while, I thought that was it. Case closed. Story out of my hands." But 2 months later, Sarah called me again, this time crying. Someone had been outside her apartment the night before. A man in an old beige sedan, parked under the streetlight, engine off, watching. When she looked out the window, he drove away. He was wearing a hat, she said. And I swear, Ethan, I saw something silver on his hand. I didn't say it, but I was thinking the same thing she was. The ring. The police promised to patrol her block. Nothing came of it. She moved 2 weeks later. I tried to move on too. But one night, while organizing the backup files, I noticed something chilling. In the scan of slide 4, at the very edge of the frame, the black border I'd always cropped out, there was a faint reflection, a warped, ghostly curve. I enhanced it, inverted the contrast. It wasn't a reflection. It was an eye. The photographer had caught part of his own reflection in a glass cabinet or mirror on the wall. Just the corner of his face, but enough. And the face wasn't smiling. It was blank, focused, looking straight into the camera lens. I sent the cropped image to Detective Harlan, who promised to forward it to forensics. That was a year ago. The case is still officially active, but no updates have ever been made public. Sometimes, when I'm walking home from work, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a beige car idling in the distance. The carousel box is gone. I handed it all over. But the fear, it stayed. I started hearing faint shutter sounds in quiet rooms. Once, my phone camera turned on by itself in the middle of the night. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe not. Sarah and I barely talk anymore. She says it's for her sanity. I get it. The more you think about the photo, the more it burrows into you, the idea that someone could hide so much evil behind something as ordinary as a vacation slide. But there's one thing that still keeps me up. That smile. The man by the pool. Because if the police never found him, if they never confirmed who he was, then maybe he's still out there. And maybe he's still collecting photos. The experience with the Desert Crest Motel had left a permanent fissure in my perception of reality. Every mundane photo, every abandoned building, seemed to carry a concealed narrative of violence. I became hypervigilant, scanning the world, both physical and digital, for secrets. I was drawn back to Reddit, not to post, but to watch. It was on a lesser-known subreddit, r/glitch, in the Matrix, that I found the next thread that would break my sanity. The post, titled "The Street View Loop House," was shared by user U/GeoGhost, who claimed to have found a perpetual digital anomaly while mapping out a cross-country route on a major satellite service. I clicked the link. It took me straight to a street view image of a nondescript 2-story house in rural Ohio. It was painted a faded, pale yellow, with a tired-looking porch and a single, overgrown oak tree in the front yard. There was nothing remarkable about it, except for what GeoGhost pointed out. "It only happens on this specific frame," the original poster wrote. "If you pan around, the other houses are static, normal. But if you click one step forward, then one step back to this exact spot, the entire street view image moves for exactly 2 seconds. It loops." My skeptical nature, though heavily battered by room 207, immediately kicked in. Impossible. Street view is a series of interconnected still photographs taken by a camera rig, not a video feed. Any perceived movement is usually lens distortion, the wind moving a branch, or a rendering glitch between frames. I followed the instructions. 1 click forward, 1 click back. And there it was. For a brief, agonizingly slow 2 seconds, the entire image shifted. It wasn't a pan, it was a subtle, internal correction, like a low-budget filmmaker making a mistake on a continuous shot. The house itself remained still, but the shadows on the front lawn deepened, then lightened, The leaves on the oak tree blurred, then sharpened, and the light reflecting off the upstairs window became a momentary white flare, then faded. Then it snapped back to the original static image. If I clicked forward and back again, the whole process repeated, an endless 2-second digital hiccup. I sent the link to Liam, our skeptic, and to Maya, a longtime online friend I'd made through my camera collecting hobby, a brilliant but highly sensitive person who fit the overreactor role perfectly. Liam's response was immediate and predictable. "It's a coding error, Ethan. Server-side rendering glitch. The algorithm is confused between two almost identical photos taken milliseconds apart. It's an optical flicker, not a loop." He sent me a link to an IT forum post explaining texture mapping issues. Maya, however, was already deep down the rabbit hole. "No, Liam is wrong. Look closely at the window. The loop isn't the whole image. The image is static. The movement is in the house. It's a localized feed, Ethan. Someone is feeding a live micro video to this exact coordinate. It feels like a warning, or a trap." Maya's comment struck me hard. Her emphasis on the localized movement felt right. The general image felt static, yet the brief 2-second flicker was so specific. I spent the next few hours meticulously recording the loop using screen capture software. When I played the captured footage back slowly, frame by frame, the truth was far more subtle and far more terrifying than a simple digital error. The full loop was comprised of only 12 frames. Liam was right that the overall image seemed to flicker between two slightly different photographs. But the focus of the motion wasn't the tree or the shadows. It was the house's second-story window on the far right. In the first frame, the static starting point, the window was dark, reflecting the sky. In frame 4, the reflection distorted slightly, as if something had passed close to the glass on the inside. In frame 8, the light inside the room briefly changed, and a faint, thin shadow, the shape of a vertical line, rushed across the interior of the pane. By frame 12, the shadow was gone, and the reflection snapped back to the original static image, ready to loop again. It wasn't a wide-angle photograph glitch. It was a very high-speed, 12-frame burst that captured a micro-event happening behind the window glass. The satellite car, in its constant recording mode, had captured a 2-second sliver of real, localized action inside that specific house. And that vertical line, the thin shadow that rushed across the frame in a quarter of a second, wasn't a curtain or a light fixture. It was too fast, too specific. "It looks like a hand," I told Maya on a video call, pointing to the slow-motion clip. "Someone is either pressing their hand against the glass and pulling it away quickly, or something is being pushed against the window from the inside." "No," Maya argued, her eyes wide on the screen. "Look at the direction of the shadow. It starts on the left side of the window and moves right, vanishing just before the sill. If it were a hand pulling away, the shadow would expand, then contract. This is a clean, vertical line. It looks like a pole, or a thin piece of wood, moving with force." Her observation was simple, but it sent a fresh spike of dread through me. A thin piece of wood, a pole, moving across the window from the inside, and moving with a speed that suggested force or desperation. It wasn't someone cleaning a window. It was someone rapidly moving a restraint or a barricade. I pulled up the metadata on the Street View image. Captured June 2017, 7 years ago. "This isn't a glitch, Liam," I typed, forwarding him the frame-by-frame analysis. "This is a 24 frame per second capture of something happening in 2017 that a global mapping service missed. It's a digital fossil." Liam finally showed a crack in his skepticism. "Okay, Ethan, that's highly disturbing. If you're right, this is a real-time event captured and looped by an algorithm. But it's 7 years old. And what could a 2-second motion of a pole mean?" I didn't answer him. I knew what it meant, or at least, I feared what it meant, because it reminded me too much of the Silent Witness case. The ordinary scene concealing an act of violence or desperation. The psychological fear here was the digital trap, the idea that millions of people had viewed this image and never noticed the 2 seconds of movement. The secret was there, open to the world, but perfectly hidden by its own simplicity. I did a deep dive into the property records for the house in Ohio. It had an odd, complicated history. The deed had been transferred 3 times in the last 5 years, all between limited liability corporations, LLCs. never to an individual. It was a digital ghost, a house with no face behind the tax records. I had to see the house in person. I told Liam and Maya I was driving to Ohio. Liam warned me again about interfering with a potential cold case, but Maya was galvanized. She offered to track the historical weather patterns for June 2017, the time the photo was taken, to confirm the lighting and shadows. My car was packed by dawn. I had the address plugged into my GPS, ironically using the same mapping service that had preserved the terror. The house was no longer a static image. It was a destination, a physical location for a digital scream. The fear now was that the house itself, having been recorded in that moment of brief, terrible action, was waiting for me. I felt like I was traveling back in time to witness a 2-second act of terror. The drive took 2 days. When I finally arrived in the small, unassuming Ohio town, the house felt immediately wrong. It stood out not because it was spectacular, but because it was utterly and perfectly neglected. The grass was waist-high, the porch was sagging, and the pale yellow paint was peeling in thick, sickly curls. I parked a block away and approached on foot, my old camera gear slung over my shoulder, pretending to be a photographer documenting abandoned architecture. I stopped at the sidewalk, staring up at the second-story window on the far right. The window was dirty, yes, but intact. It looked like any ordinary, forgotten house in the country. Nothing moving, nothing looping. The silence was heavier than the digital flicker. I circled the property, keeping to the edge of the tall weeds. I needed to get inside. The front door was sealed tight, the windows all either locked or too small to slip through. The back door, hidden behind a thicket of rose bushes, was also bolted. I paused by a small, overgrown patch of garden near the back porch. As I was brushing away a few stubborn vines, my foot snagged on something hard, half buried in the soil. I knelt down, digging with my hands. It was a small, rusted tin box, the kind old ladies keep sewing notions in. It was waterlogged and difficult to open, but when I finally forced the lid back, a thick, mildewy scent wafted out, followed by a glint of metal. Inside the box, resting on a bed of rotted cotton, were 2 objects: a small, tarnished silver ring and a single, rectangular metal key. The key was a heavy, old-fashioned skeleton key, unlike anything used on modern doors. I messaged Maya. "Found a key buried in the garden. Looks old. Skeleton key." Her reply came back immediately, her excitement overriding her usual caution. "Be careful, Ethan, but you have to try it. Maybe the key is what they were trying to hide, like a secret safe." The key was too large and too old for the front door, the back door, or the windows. I felt a pang of crushing disappointment, the familiar letdown of a mystery solved by a mundane truth. Then, I remembered the specific architectural details of the house I'd studied in the property records. A small, stone-lined cellar door on the side of the house, often used for coal or root vegetables, hidden beneath a tangle of ivy. I found the door, a low, thick wooden slab set flush with the foundation of the house. It had a heavy, ornamental lock. I inserted the key. It slid in smoothly. A quick, decisive turn, and the tumbler clicked. I pulled the door open. A rush of cold, damp air hit me, smelling of stale earth and deep, pervasive mildew. I pointed my flashlight down a set of steep, rough-hewn stone steps. The cellar was pitch black and silent. I descended carefully. The basement was a classic unfinished crawl space. Low ceiling, packed, dirt floor, cobwebs, and a few old mason jars lining a wooden shelf. And then I saw the wall. It wasn't a finished wall. It was a recent addition, a floor-to-ceiling barrier of raw, unpainted drywall, erected to divide the cellar. The work was sloppy, clearly done in a hurry. I ran my hand over the fresh seam where the drywall met the stone foundation. It was flimsy and hollow. I looked at the house above me, back to the second-story window, and the digital loop of the rushing pole. I looked at the sloppy wall in the cellar. The panic became a blinding certainty. Something was being hidden inside the house. And the rapid movement in the window wasn't a warning, it was an attempt to keep something in. I grabbed a broken piece of lumber I'd seen near the stairs and drove the sharp end into the drywall. It went through with a muffled, tearing sound. I enlarged the hole, tearing away the paper and plaster. My flashlight beam cut through the opening. The small space behind the wall was empty. Empty, except for 2 things. The first was a series of crude, childlike drawings tacked to the rough stone foundation. Drawings of stick figures, a large one, always with a fierce, angry frown, and a smaller one, always with a massive, exaggerated smile. The second thing was tucked into the corner, half hidden beneath a few scraps of torn tarp. It was a section of what looked like heavy-duty plumbing pipe, about 5 feet long, covered in a sticky, black residue. I lifted it out, and the end of the pipe, which had been wrapped in a few layers of duct tape, came off. Inside the pipe, rolled up tight like a scroll, was a single, brittle sheet of paper. The paper was an old map of the house, hastily sketched. It was marked with a red felt-tip pen. Most of the rooms were X'd out, but the second-floor bedroom with the looping window was circled, and next to it, written in shaky, barely legible handwriting, was a single word: loop. Beneath that, on the drawing of the cellar, an arrow pointed from the inside of the hidden wall to the outside. Door. I realized what the pole was. It wasn't a barricade or a weapon. The black residue on the pipe. It was old, dried-out tar. This pipe was the tool. And the movement in the window was the desperate action of someone trying to use that pipe to signal for help. The pipe was long enough to reach from the center of the upstairs room to the window, and the person inside was violently slamming it against the pane, hoping the street view camera would capture the movement and alert someone. They didn't know the camera was just passing by. They just knew they had a 2-second window of time. I stared at the drawings again. The frowning adult, the smiling child. Then I looked back at the pipe. It was heavy, wrapped in the sticky black tar, and on the bottom of it, I noticed a final, horrifying detail. It was scored with tiny, faint grooves, evenly spaced, almost like teeth marks. The pipe had been used not just as a signaling tool, but as a rudimentary filing device. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rush in my ears. I scrambled out of the cellar, key in hand, the crude pipe in the other. I didn't call the police. I didn't need to. I knew, with a sick, certain dread, that whatever story was contained in this house was deeper, colder, and more personal than the police could handle. The digital loop wasn't the tragedy, it was the proof. I reached my car and immediately called Maya. Maya, listen to me, I gasped, out of breath. The drawings, the loop. I found the key in the garden with the silver ring. What was the ring? Maya, immediately sensing the shift in my tone, pulled up her files. The silver ring? I cross-referenced the property records and the historical town records. The only person connected to the house with a large silver ring was the original owner, who vanished a few years before the 2017 photo. His name was Arthur Finch. I looked down at the silver ring in my palm, the one I'd found buried alongside the key. Maya, the smiling stick figure, the kid with the huge smile. What if that wasn't a smile? The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The ring, the key, the pipe, the 2-second loop. The perpetual smile, I whispered. It's the digital loop. It's what they were trying to hide, not an angry adult. It was the smile. Maya, hearing the terror in my voice, finally understood. Ethan, what are you saying? I'm saying that the small stick figure, the one with the huge exaggerated smile, it was never a smile. It was a forced expression. It was the frantic, jagged line of a mouth drawn wide, the permanent expression of someone being tormented for so long they didn't know how to draw a simple line for a mouth anymore. It's a drawing of someone being trapped and forced to grin. And the pipe was too long to be used, only for signaling. It was the one thing they had, the only sharp edge they could control. They were using it to file the key they had found in the garden, hoping to break the lock on the cellar or the window frame to finally escape the house that the internet looped forever. The digital loop was a 2-second sliver of time, a fraction of a second when the victim had finally broken free of their captor's control, just long enough to try and smash the window with the pipe. It was a split-second attempt at survival, captured and immortalized in a glitch that the entire world saw and dismissed. I dropped the pipe and the ring into the glove compartment, then drove an hour out of town before calling the local police with an anonymous tip about the buried key and the hastily built wall. I left that house haunted, not by a ghost, but by a 2-second, high-speed loop of a desperate act of survival that had been preserved by a digital mapping algorithm. I now knew that the world was full of these tiny, secret screams, captured in static and forgotten. The real horror was that I could no longer look at a benign image without seeing the violence frozen within. The persistent fear was the belief that every static image was a captured crime scene, and I was the only one cursed to see the flicker. After The Silent Witness and The Perpetual House, I became obsessed with the concept of a digital fossil, a captured moment of pure, hidden terror that was missed by everyone because it was so mundane. I spent my time on subreddits that dealt with technical glitches and surveillance theories. It was there, on r divided by tech surveillance, that I found the next thread. Posted under the username u divided by Ecolapse, the title was simple: "My smart speaker is picking up conversations that aren't mine. They sound like they're coming from inside my walls." The post detailed a terrifying phenomenon. The OP, a woman I'll call Sarah P., distinct from my friend Sarah, the calm thinker, lived in an older apartment building in a dense metropolitan area. She owned a popular brand of smart speaker, the kind you ask for the weather and play music on. For the past 3 weeks, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., the speaker would briefly, without a wake word, play a short, muffled audio clip. It wasn't a song or a news brief. It was a fragment of a hushed, tense conversation, usually just a few seconds of a low voice, saying a name or a command, followed by a sigh or a sharp, static sound. At first, I thought it was a neighbor whose Wi-Fi was bleeding into my mesh network, Sarah P. wrote. But the transcript the service provided sometimes misidentified the source. It would list the speaker's location as Device 1, living room, my speaker, even though I knew the sound wasn't coming from the room. It sounded like it was coming from the foundation, like a pipe. It felt close, too close. Liam, my skeptic friend, immediately dismissed it. It's a firmware update bug. The voice recognition algorithm is registering a noise outside the house as a wake word, and the location data is confusing the ambient noise with the device's internal acoustics. Delete the app, factory reset, and stop being paranoid. But I couldn't dismiss it. Liam's explanation was technically sound for a simple error, but it didn't account for the OP's persistent fear that the audio was close. It reminded me of the Desert Crest Motel. The fear wasn't the image. It was the proximity of the violence. I reached out to Sarah P., and using my background in vintage audio restoration, convinced her to send me a few of the raw audio clips she had downloaded from the service's archive. When my friend Sarah, the calm thinker, and I listened to them in my soundproof studio, the effect was chilling. The clips were dominated by a deep, resonant sound, a bass-heavy, low-frequency hum that pulsed beneath the faint voices. "It's the acoustic signature of a building," my friend Sarah stated, adjusting the spectrum analyzer. "That low-frequency hum, it's not ambient room noise. It's a very specific, sustained vibration, like the sound of air moving through a thick, enclosed concrete space, or a sound traveling through a dense structure, like a basement or a foundation." The speaker wasn't picking up a distant conversation over the airwaves. It was picking up conversations that were being transmitted through the physical structure of the building. The smart device, designed to be hypersensitive to the human voice, was acting as a digital seismograph, recording the vibrations of a conversation happening not in the next apartment, but inside the walls themselves. The device, confused by the sound traveling through the building's own skeleton, registered the sound as its own. The uncertainty became a cold certainty. There was an enclosed, hidden space in that building, and something or someone was inside it. We focused on the words. The argument was always muffled, tense, and low volume, but repeated listening allowed us to pull out 3 consistent fragments. A woman's voice, always a choked gasp, followed by the word, "Stop." A man's voice, a low command. The key. A different man's voice, calm, final. "No one will hear." The implication was clear. This was not a domestic dispute. It was a confinement. Using the address Sarah P. had provided, my friend Sarah and I mapped out the apartment building. It was a 4-story pre-war brick structure, the kind with thick firewalls and a sprawling, labyrinthine basement that housed the old boiler and utility rooms. Sarah P.'s apartment was on the 2nd floor. Her smart speaker sat on a chest of drawers against the wall that divided her apartment from the main corridor. Based on the density of the acoustic signature, the source had to be directly beneath her apartment in the enclosed space of the basement. Near the dividing wall, a utility closet or an old storage locker. The key to the structural fear lay in the fragment. No one will hear. The people speaking had to be acutely aware of the building's insulation, its thickness, and its ability to absorb sound. They knew they were in a place designed for silence. The next morning, I drove out to the location. I was armed not with a crowbar, but with a highly sensitive contact microphone, a small piezoelectric disc designed to pick up vibrations through solid objects. The basement was exactly as I had imagined: dark, humid, and segmented into various utility alcoves. I found the spot directly beneath Sarah P's bedroom wall. It was a narrow, cement block closet, labeled simply, "Utilities, Access Restricted." A heavy, industrial padlock secured the rusty metal door. I pressed my ear against the cement. Nothing. Absolute silence. The structure was doing exactly what the man in the recording boasted it would do. It was swallowing all sound. I affixed the contact mic to the heavy, cold cement wall, ran the cable to my recorder, and put on the headphones. The initial sound was a dull, deafening roar, the sound of the building's plumbing and settling foundation, amplified. I filtered the frequencies, isolating the low end, and lowered the gain. And there it was. Not the clear sound of a radio or a speaker, but the sound of human voices, muffled, compressed, and vibrating through the cement. I pressed the record button, capturing 30 seconds of the structure's silent scream. I pulled the mic off and played the file back. The fragments were there, clearer than on Sarah P's smart speaker. The man's voice, quiet and controlled. "Tell me about the key again." The woman's voice, a dry, sobbing sound. I can't, please." The fear was no longer just the sound. It was the realization that I was standing 10 feet away from an active confinement. The speaker had acted as a perfect, remote witness. I had to get into that closet. I found the building manager, a large, weary-looking man named Frank, in the main lobby office. I calmly explained the situation, not the smart speaker part, but the structural vibration. I'm an independent contractor specializing in building diagnostics. I lied, showing him a laminated card I'd quickly printed. "I'm picking up an unusual acoustic anomaly in the basement utility closet, directly beneath 2B. It suggests a major stress fracture or maybe a water line break. I need to access the closet immediately to prevent serious structural damage." Frank didn't hesitate. He folded his arms. A classic, skeptical denial. "Stress fracture? Kid, this building is a fortress. It's just the old boiler kicking in. The sound travels. That closet is just supplies. I'm not unlocking it for a vibration you picked up on a toy." His refusal wasn't what unnerved me. It was his tone. It was too quick, too dismissive. It was the absolute, matter-of-fact denial of a man protecting a secret, not the skepticism of a man protecting his time. It was the same cold, specific denial that Liam had offered, but delivered with the weight of authority. He was the gatekeeper. As I was leaving the office, Sarah P., the OP, rushed in, looking frantic. She saw me, a stranger in the hallway, and hesitated. Frank, the manager, immediately tensed up. I called about the noise again. Sarah P. said to Frank, her voice shaking. "It's not just the voice now. Last night, the speaker played a new sound, a dry, scraping noise, like metal on concrete. It lasted 5 minutes. Frank gave her a patronizing, pitying smile. "Miss P, I'm telling you, it's just the pipes. The building is old. I'll send maintenance to check the boiler again, okay? Nothing to worry about." He was gaslighting her. He was the skeptic in the story, but with power. And then, Sarah P. remembered something I had told her to watch for. She leaned in close to me, ignoring Frank. 2 days ago, she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. I saw him. Frank. He was carrying a small, square cardboard box into the basement. It looked like an electronics box. The manager wasn't denying the truth. He was protecting his investment. He knew the acoustic anomaly was real. I had to get into that closet, and I couldn't risk the police being dismissed by the manager's calm denial. I called my friend Sarah. "He's involved," I told her. "The manager is lying. He's concealing something. I need you to find me a way to open that lock, quickly and quietly." Sarah, always the calm thinker, did not question the panic in my voice. An hour later, she was at the building with a small, discreet toolkit, a set of lockpicks, and a heavy-duty hydraulic spreader, ostensibly for rescuing pets from tight spaces. We found the utility closet again. The building was quiet now. The middle of the day. Sarah worked quickly on the heavy padlock. Her hands were steady, her focus absolute. Click, the padlock dropped heavily to the cement floor. We pulled the metal door open. The closet was small, maybe 5 feet by 5 feet, and crammed with cleaning supplies, bags of rock, salt, and old maintenance manuals. The only thing of any significance was a series of pipes running vertically against the back wall, hissing faintly. The cement walls were thick, perfectly sound dampening. My stomach dropped. The dread I had felt moments ago was replaced by a hollow, sickening disappointment. We had broken into a utility closet. It was all a mistake. The low-frequency hum, the voices, the fear, it was all just the old boiler. After all, I had put my friend at risk and terrified an innocent woman, all because of an algorithm glitch. I was wrong, I whispered, the shame hot on my face. It's just the pipes. The acoustic signature was just the water. Sarah ignored the disappointment in my voice. She was not a skeptic, and she was already moving, her flashlight beam cutting across the rough-hewn cement floor. She stopped at the corner where the floor met the back wall, near the pipes. The scraping sound. "Ethan," she said, her voice low. The one Sarah P. heard. Metal on concrete. "Look here." The cement floor was dusty, but at that exact spot, there was a small, 3-inch section of the floor that was perfectly, unnaturally clean. It was a tiny, scrubbed-out ellipse in the dust, right next to the wall. It was too small to be a shoe print, and too deliberate to be a smudge. I knelt down and touched the clean spot. The surface of the concrete was slightly rougher here, almost scraped. I looked up, tracing the spot to the wall. Tucked onto a low, dusty wooden shelf, hidden behind a bucket of cleaning powder, was a small, matte black object. It was an older model of the smart speaker, the exact same model Sarah P. had in her apartment. It was plugged into a dusty outlet near the floor. The mic was covered in a thick layer of dust, almost a camouflage, but the LED light was flashing a slow, pulsing green, the listening divided by recording indicator. It wasn't connected to the building's Wi-Fi. It was operating on an independent, local mesh network. The horrifying truth hit me. This device was not bleeding a conversation from a wall. It was the source of the bleed. The people in the other room, wherever they were confident the walls would conceal their crime. So, to ensure they had a remote recording of the confinement, maybe for blackmail, maybe for proof they planted a second, network device in the most structurally silent room in the building. The sealed utility closet. This device wasn't listening to the air. It was pressed right against the wall, amplifying and recording the sound of the structural vibrations, the sounds of the woman's struggle, the man's commands, the scrape of metal on concrete, the sounds that had successfully traveled through the cement from the other side of the wall, from a place that Frank the manager controlled. The manager's skepticism wasn't to cover a lie, it was to cover a trap. He had planted the device, knowing that the structural bleed was so clear that it would inevitably be picked up by Sarah P.'s speaker upstairs, and knowing that everyone would simply dismiss the bleed as a glitch. The man had used a common, mundane piece of technology as a double agent to listen to the torture in his own building, all while denying its existence. The echo chamber wasn't a glitch. It was a digital eavesdropping system. I pulled the plug on the device. The little green light went dark, cutting off the digital lifeline to whatever horror was being documented. "The scrape," I muttered, looking at the clean spot on the floor. They were using that spot to brace something while they were listening to the recording through the speaker's own output, right before they unplugged it. We called the police from a payphone blocks away, giving them the details of the planted device, the manager's suspicious behavior, and the evidence of the audio we had recorded. We did not mention Sarah P. or the Reddit thread. The police arrived, and 2 days later, the news was discreet. Frank the manager had been arrested. A small, sealed-off sub-basement room, an old, bricked-up World War II air raid shelter located behind a false wall in the utility access-restricted closet had been found. It contained the woman who was alive but traumatized. The key she couldn't talk about was the master key to the building, which she was being interrogated for. The man who was with Frank was still at large. I had done my part. The cycle of survival was complete. But the persistent fear remained. The real terror wasn't the man's brutality. It was his ingenuity. He had turned a piece of innocuous, everyday technology into a digital surveillance tool, trusting in the collective skepticism of a glitch to hide his crime in plain sight. Before I left the closet, I had picked up the small black speaker. I held it now, months later, in my hands. The case was smooth, anonymous, and terrifying. On the plastic base, where the manufacturer's label should have been, there was a single, tiny, almost invisible mark, etched with something sharp. The perfect, hand-scribed numeral 3. I put the device down on my desk, my reflection staring back at me in the dark screen. 3 disturbing Reddit threads. 3 secrets hidden in plain sight. The silent witness slide, the looping house video, and now the echo chamber device. Each a testament to the fact that people weren't relying on complex conspiracies to hide their crimes. They were relying on the human mind's innate desire to dismiss the horrific as a simple error. My name is Ethan. I am the one who looks at the glitches. I am the one who listens to the structural echoes. And I know, with cold, heart-wrenching certainty, that if this device was number 3, there is a number 1 and a number 2 out there, still listening, still recording, and still hiding their secrets in the static of the world. And I know I will find them. I can't stop looking, because the world is full of these devices, and they are all talking to each other.